What's the creepiest or most unexplainable thing you've ever seen that you haven't shared anywhere? Serious. Back in 2016, my mother was staying at my place because my father was in the hospital at the time and my apartment was right next to the hospital. One night I had this dream that the landline rings and my mother answers the phone and hears the news that my dad has passed away. She hangs up the phone and tells me that my uncle, a doctor at the hospital my father was in, just gave her the news of my father's passing. I wake up startled. I have a drink of water and just as I start feeling relieved that this was all just a bad dream, the phone rings and my mom picks it up. I was just watching her from a distance, noticing the expression on her face, noticing the tears that started dripping down her cheek, and she hangs up the phone and tells me that my uncle just told her that my father has passed away. This is the only unexplained thing that ever happened to me, and this is the first time I share this with anybody. As a kid, I had weirdly specific dreams that became true as well, but it was only about how and what candy I'd get on the day. I am sorry for your loss at it. Okay, this got big. For those who thought that my dream influenced my choice in candy on the next day, the dream looked like this. I was sitting with my bro in our room. My mom comes home, telling us we get candy from the closet in the living room as usual. My brother and I run to the closet. I jump on the couch, my brother jumping from excitement next to me. Finally, my mom came in with the key and gives us that one specific peanut candy. On the next day, it happened as dreamed. I wondered all day long if I would get candy and if I get the peanut one. My mom never asked us what kind we wanted, and I can't control that my brother stays on the ground. #X200B, some say it was a deja vu, but they feel different for me. I don't think so. Me too. I had dreams that were weirdly vivid that were from my viewpoint that would happen later. I was convinced I could see the future, but my predictions were pretty useless. LOL. I've since learned there's a form of deja vu that makes you feel like something you're doing you've dreamed of before. Edit. It's called déjà vu, courtesy of UF22 Android, smiley face. Déjà vu. I experience it a lot. It always is so crazy when I'm experiencing the moment in real life, and I'm like, wow, I've been here before. Sometimes I purposely say a different thing or do a different action than how my dream went, and it feels like changing my destiny or something. Haha. Yeah, this is it. Such a weird experience. I don't dream much anymore, so it doesn't happen very often nowadays, but it used to happen constantly when I was younger. Rescued a blue tick coon hound that had bad anxiety when we left, so he had to be crated. Went to the grocery store with wife and 2 young kids and left the dog in the crate. When we got back, the dog was out of the crate, but the crate was completely closed and latched. There was no apparent way it could have happened. We problem solved it for the entire day and couldn't figure out how he did it. Called him Blue Dini after that. His unmatched escape skills continued though. He could open doors. No fence could hold him in. The dog simply climbed fences. We ended up rehoming him for his own safety. He actually wound up as a farm dog, which I'm sure was his best home. I got recalled into work and was driving at about 3 a.m. I was in a very rural area in western Washington. As I come around a curve, I see a woman in a nightgown on the side of the road looking up at a steep embankment. Just standing there staring away from the road. There are no homes nearby. Not for miles. I call 911 and pull over about a minute up the road, not knowing what to think. Deputy showed up, couldn't locate anyone, and was as dumbfounded as I was. What is it with ghosts wearing white, flowing nightgowns? Just once I want to hear about a girl ghost rocking SpongeBob pajama pants and fuzzy mismatched socks. Yeah, it is always a soldier in uniform or a woman in a white dress. You never see someone rocking parachute pants or platform shoes. Typically, ghosts linger because of unfinished business. You think someone with frosted tips and wearing Jenko jeans is going to die with any regrets. Yeah. So many parties I didn't get to. My father died when I was 15. In my freshman year of college, me and my roommate in the dorms were somewhat close, but really had only been known each other for a month when the creepy thing happened. I hadn't told her much about my childhood, but she knew that my father had passed. One day she woke me up and asked me, "Did your father used to call you? Insert silly childhood nickname here." I hadn't heard that name since I was 6 or 7. I definitely never told her that he used to call me that, as it was a repressed memory that I hadn't thought about in a long time. Anyway, as it turned out, she had a dream that my father had come to her and asked her to take care of me, calling me by the silly childhood nickname. It was always difficult for me that my father never saw me graduate high school or start college. But I guess he did, from wherever he is now. When I was about 9, in the 1970s, I was playing football in the street. A bus came along, so I jumped up on the pavement. As it passed, I noticed my aunt and she smiled and waved to me. When the bus had gone, I carried on playing. I went home several hours later to find my aunt had died the previous evening. I once had a dream right around the time of day that my grandma passed. She was on a bus and happy it could be. It stopped near my grandfather and I, on the road next to theirs, and she wanted me to go along. My grandfather kept insisting that I can't go. The bus left and she was smiling and laughing as she was going to the big casino in the sky. She loved going to the casinos. I woke up shortly after from a phone call that she had died about 15 minutes ago. Interesting, these comments about buses. After my granddad died of Alzheimer's when I was a teenager, I was so upset and I cried myself to sleep for a long time. Then one night a few weeks later, I dreamt we were sat on the bus together chatting away, which was lovely because he hadn't been himself for a few years before he died. After a while he pressed the bell and said this was his stop and he was sorry he couldn't stay on longer with me. We hugged and said our goodbyes and he got off, smiled and waved and tipped his cap as the bus pulled away. It was the goodbye I never got to have and I felt such a sense of relief and closure after that dream. It was almost 20 years ago and I remember it vividly. I was 10 riding my bicycle at dusk along the road I lived on, which was parallel to a set of railroad tracks. I moved off the road as a car sped by and a beer bottle came sailing at me from the front passenger seat. I could see 2 young women turned around laughing at me through the back window. I flipped them off and kept riding. About 30 seconds later, I heard the train slam into them. There's an app that has a database of all recorded accidents at railroad crossings. You could look this up if you really want closure. Edit, apps.apple.com. There were 2 guys in the front of the car and 2 women in the back. All of them died. The driver's BAC was above the limit. Holy shit balls, have you flipped anyone else off after that? You might have some alternative death note ability where you murder people by giving them the bird. My cat hasn't died yet. 9 lives. So how many times have you flipped them off? She's still just staring at me? So not only do you have an instant kill power, you also have an immortal cat. Some people get all the luck. When I was about 11 or 12, I went with my friend and my younger brother to play football in a park that was in a pretty remote place, so there were never many people. Basically 3 or 4 people came dressed in like Victorian-style clothes, set up a box underneath a tree with big branches, tied a rope around it. One of them stood there with this noose around his neck and then his friend kicked the box so he was hanging. They took turns doing this, and we left. Was super weird thinking back to it, and I have to check with my brother whenever I think about it to make sure it actually happened. Edit, for people asking how did they not die, they were taking turns etc. From what I remember, the box mustn't have been particularly high relative to the length of the rope, so there wasn't much of a drop if any. I don't remember how long they were swinging for, but I suppose it must have been between 15 seconds to a minute. Then the friends would put the box back for the one hanging to stand on so they could get down, and someone else would take their place. This sounds like an edgy photo shoot to me. That's what I thought as well, some photo shoot or a video movie someone was making. Either that or some elaborate sex game. Yep. The internet has convinced me that everything weird and inexplicable is because of a weird sex thing. My friend and I were sleeping in my parents' room one night when she was over, and it was probably about 3 a.m. Suddenly we hear a sound like a fart from the corner of the room, and distinctly from this one corner. So I ask my friend if she farted, and of course she says no, as it clearly came from that corner. Thinking maybe it's my dogs, as they sometimes sleep in my parents' room, I go and check it out but realize they're not in the room with us. Okay, so that's weird, I thought, and my friend also said she heard a distinct fart too, so we assumed that maybe we both misheard. Then all of a sudden an unknown caller starts ringing my phone, and I don't answer because at this point I'm freaked the duck out. After I decline the call, I receive a message from an unknown caller with the same area code as the caller who had just called me. The text message is all in Spanish, and me and my friend decide to paste the text into Google Translate, where it proceeds to say, "Did you hear that fart?" Needless to say, we never slept in my parents' room again, and we're convinced that we have a Spanish farting ghost in our presence. Edit: no brothers that would have pranked me either. I have a sister, but she was as amused as I was when I told her. Freaky shit. More than any other story on this thread, I want an explanation for this. The Spanish farting ghost, who can text? Someone with a fart machine and a phone trolling some people. This is 100% something I would do to my friends. I'd choose a really obscure language though.